10, 9, 8. Go for main engine start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello MouseWorks fans, and welcome to another edition of MouseWorks Rocketry. And we're going to be building another one, and this one is another Estes rocket, but this is exclusively through Hobby Lobby. Hopefully they'll market it slightly different through the regular Estes line, but anyways, it's called the Vapor, and give you kind of a look at that. And it is a same size as the other rockets I've been doing with the 1.63 diameter tube. This one's a lot longer than some of the others, a little bit longer than the High Flyer XL that I finished not too long ago. Anyways, this is actually going to be quite a treat to do one that's pretty big. And so let's look at some of the specs on it and look at some of the parts. And we're going to build this first one probably pretty stock, just with a few modifications as usual. So stay tuned. Okay, so let's take a look at the Vapor specs. We've got 900 foot on an E12.6, so it's a pretty heavy rocket. You can do a T12.3 or E12.6. They give you two sets of decals, one with these little swooshes and the other with a little different swoosh. Pretty neat paint job that they've got on here with the splatter effect. Looks like the length is 42.2 inches, so it's pretty big. Diameter 1.64, and an 18-inch parachute. So let's see what's in the package and what we're getting. First up is the coupler, because it has two long tubes. And it's not a double stage rocket, but that's the coupler to keep those together. Got the nose cone, which is the super pointy nose cone. Let's see what else we got in here. We got the instructions. And it looks like it's a 3-fin rocket, so this is going to be a pretty quick build. There's the fins there. They're actually really thick, though. They're thicker than 1/8 inch. So, be interesting why they're so thick. I'm not sure exactly, but maybe for strength, which is kind of nice. Unless there's two sheets there. No, it's one sheet. Okay. So, next up we have a warranty for all the parts and defects. We've got parachute, which we're going to replace it with a nylon one that I like to use. We've got the dummy engine tube for the E-size engine. We've got the centering rings, which are going to hold this engine tube in the straight in between the body tubes. We've got the shock cord, which is the rubber shock cord, which I'm going to always replace that. We've got the engine rings and the engine block. This is the screw-on engine stopper. The orange piece is a D-size adapter, so if you want to use D instead of E's, they are shorter than an E. And then the launch lug there. And then last but not least, we have some decals that they touted on the front, and there they are, the Vapor decals. Very nice looking. The yellow is very solid, which is nice, so if you put it over a dark color, it should still show up. So okay, that looks like everything in the bag, so let's get started. Okay, we're going to have a look at the instructions real quick. First page, they're talking about all the tools and supplies. Scissors, pencil, rulers, fine sandpaper, epoxy, which they're now starting to recommend epoxy for the plastic to paper parts. Carpenter's glue like Tide Bond, my suggestion. Plastic cement, hobby knife, masking tape. I suggest the Tamiya masking tape, because this stuff does not stick hard to the paper and tear the paper, but it is very good tape indeed. Clear tape they're asking for, not sure what the clear tape's for, maybe to keep the nose cone from slipping off too easy. Paint and a sanding block they're actually suggesting now too, so kind of interesting. They added a few things to this one than their normal rockets I worked with before, so which is nice. They kind of work with the people who build these and understand that these might as well just add the things that make life easier. They did put a thing on here about test fitting all the parts. Make sure you have all the parts. Please record date found on decal and keep for future reference. Okay, that's interesting. That might be part of the warranty thing. They say keep for further reference, so they do want you to keep the instructions. The number on the decal must be the serial number of the rocket. So, anyways, kind of interesting. Got the fins, 3 fins, super sharp, very small, but long, so they should be very high speed. We'll have to make sure that we're balanced correctly. The centering rings. We've got the nose cone, the body, all that good stuff, and then they're showing the basic assembly. The parachute, which is pre-strung. Okay, page 1. Now the good thing, there's nothing on the back of these, so when you cut those out, you're not ruining anything. Last rocket I did, they actually printed it on the back of part of this, and you had to cut it out, and it screwed it up. Anyways, this is the shock cord mount, pocket mount. Some people call it the tea bag because it looks like a little tea bag when you're done. You got fin lines, launch lug, guide, putting the motor mount together. And we'll make sure we measure that correctly. Got the putting the fin line guide on. We've got putting the engine mount in the main body tube, sanding the fins, rounding the fins, gluing the fins, putting on the launch lug, gluing the 2 tubes together. This should be long enough that actually I can probably just put the fins on the 1 tube before putting the 2 together and still use that my Estes fin guide, which looks like this guy here. This has been coming in very, very handy to mark tubes and to align those fins, which we'll show a little later. Might look at my other videos too to see how these are going. The Sasha videos are a little more complete, so that's a good one to start with. Also, please like and subscribe so you always get all the information that I'm putting out. Okay, putting on the launch lug. They're talking about fillets, which is nice. Putting on the shock cord and painting. Then on the back side they show about attaching the parachute, loading it with wadding, putting your engine ring on with epoxy, and they're telling you to scuff it up, which is nice. They didn't do that at first. And putting the engine in and using that insert. Okay, and then your launch information. So, and always go to nar.org for information on the safety code. So we'll start at step 1. Okay, step 1, we're going to need the engine mount tube. We need the engine block out of this little baggie here. We need the dummy engine tube, which will give us the actual depth that we need to put the engine block in the engine tube. So those 3 items there. Now what I'm going to first do is use my measuring tool here, which marking guide, and on this one, since it's hard to mark, the first measurement is 1/2 inch. It's hard to get the tube to mark when it's in there like that, so I always reverse the measurement, and then that way I can have the other side here, and it makes it a lot steadier to mark that center round. So let's find out how long this piece is. Always measure this good stuff twice. So we've got 4 inches. So that means that we want 3.5 inches from the front to the back. Now, just to make things easy, even the best rocket builders get this messed up. So I'm going to mark this as the front, and this is the rear. That way I just don't make the marks in the wrong place and glue stuff together and be upset. Okay, so we want 3.5. So I'm going to go to 3.5 inches on this marking guide. I'm going to bring the guide up to that point. I'm going to put the tube in the cradle. Let's do the instructions out here. And I'm going to put the pencil in the end here. And this is kind of an awkward system to do, but we're going to press on the pencil and turn the tube at the same time, keeping it pressed to the rear and pressed down. Okay, So now we should have that 1/2 inch mark. Always double check it just in case it slipped. And we've got 1/2 of an inch. Okay, so the next we'll do 2 inches, which is halfway, so it doesn't really matter which way we go. So we're going to put that in there. Let me see if I can get you a better view of doing this. Pressing on the pencil, turning it around, and there's the 2 inch mark. Okay, so that is going to give us where we're going to put the glue. Okay, the next line I've got the 1/2 inch, the 2 inch, and then there's one actually I'm going to have to put the glue in at 3 inches. So let's mark that as well, even though you really don't need the outside line, but I like to put that there to know exactly where my glue is going to be. So again, we'll put that down. We'll rotate the tube, and we've got our mark. Now, just to be clear, since this one's just a glue line, I'm just going to mark on here glue, or G. Put the whole word, and then this, these two are actually rings, centering rings. So I'll put CR for centering ring on both of those. Again, front and back. So, anyways, we'll get that all taken care of and move on. Okay, we are on to the dummy tube here, dummy engine tube, and we're going to actually push this in, push this block in the correct amount, and it is actually saying we need to make a mark of 3/8, which is kind of weird. They're usually 1/2 inch, but whatever, we'll do 3/8. So we're going to mark here on 3/8, which is right there. Okay, so we can also use our little measuring thing here to make that mark, and ready to glue. Okay, so now we've got this tube. It's actually marked at 3 3/8 this way, which leaves 3/8 this way, and then we're going to put the that block in there, and then we're going to push it down to that mark there, and that should center it right where that mark is there, which is where our glue will be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little stick, cuticle stick. I get them from Sally's Beauty. They're real cheap for a whole bag of them, and I'm going to mark. I can hold on to everything. Where the stick would stop to put the glue onto this area here. So basically it'll go like that and stop there, and that way I know that's where I should spread the glue. I don't want the glue too far either way. So okay, so now we're going to use our tight bond. Put a big blob out there. Okay, make sure I'm working with the right one. That's the glue line. So we're going to take the stick, put some glue together, go down to that line, and just start to smear that glue in that area right there. Okay, if it goes one way or the other a little bit, but we just don't want it too far one way or the other, because then you could, when you push that piece through it, it can actually start gluing and it'll slow down. And actually, the more of this you put in, the more it lubricates. Believe it or not, less you do, it freezes up pretty quick, and you don't have a lot of time to move stuff. Okay, so now I've got the glue in there, ready to go. I'm going to put this into the rear, make sure everything's rear, and then I'm going to use this to push it in down to that line. So we're going to slowly push it in. You'll feel it start to slow down because it's hitting the glue. Get to the line. I usually give it a little bit of a twist as I pull it out, and that should place the ring correctly where it's supposed to be. Now, what I'm going to also do, since I can get to it real easy, is I'm going to put a fillet on the front of the ring. I'll do that right now since we're accessing it. And I'm just going to use the stick, and I'm going to put it around here, just making sure it doesn't get on the inside of the ring. And this will reinforce it and keep it from pushing through the rocket. Okay. Just doing it like that. Okay, so we got a fillet in there. We're going to let it dry vertically. That way the glue has a chance to settle and go into the gaps around it. If we do it the other way, it'll pull out. So this takes a little bit to tack up so it can still move for a little while, so that we'll definitely leave it like that. We can double check just to make sure that we're in the right area. Okay, just make sure that doesn't get glued in there. And you can actually see it in there. Show you, it's right there. So that's how you should place that. Okay, so we'll set that aside to tack up and dry and get ready to do the rings. Okay, we need 3 rings. They give you two packs. So we'll just cut out 3 of them and save the other one if we ever want to scratch build anything. Always keep the spares in a box or a bag. If you ever, when you get to the point of wanting to start scratch building your own stuff or replacing them, you'll have those. And I'm just cutting through the little, where the laser cut is, where they have the little key there that's holding the pieces together. I'm trying not to make a score into this material. If I do, I have to either replace it or make sure I get rid of that score, because that's going to compromise the strength. So I'll pop that one out, that one out, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sanding stick and I'm going to get rid of these nibs. Even though they're really small, they can interfere with this touching the side of the tube, and we always want that contact to be pretty secure. So I'm just going to sand those down, and then I'll sand the inside or cut the inside ones down so there's no nibs. I'll do the rest and we'll be ready to install those. Okay, on the instructions they actually give you a drawing of side view of where the rings are supposed to go, right down there. And that's actually interesting because they actually show you where the centering, or I'm sorry, the engine block should end up, and they show it at 3 3/8. So we can just double check that. We got 3 3/8 is right there, so we put that in till it stops up against the block, and it's right there. So we are in the right place. So we're just double checking that. So it gets kind of confusing putting these rings on for most people, because even though they give you the measurements, you actually put the glue in here and you push the block through it and then up to here. So it actually gives you enough area to put enough glue that it pushes it and makes a pretty good bond between the tube and that. So anyways, that's why they make sure they are now putting better instructions on there. So now I'm going to put those rings on, and the first centering ring is towards the rear here. And I'm just going to take some glue, and what I like to do is I like to make it a little bit thin so I can still see that line, because I don't need a lot of glue on that the area here, because we're actually going to do a fillet on either side of the centering ring, which is going to reinforce it. But what this does is, since I have a perfectly done ring around it with the pencil, I can center that ring exactly 90 degrees. Whereas if I just guesstimate it and it's a little bit off and it's crooked this way or this way, it doesn't fit in the tube very well. And if you do them all that way, the whole engine can be canted off to one side or the other and your rocket could fly funny. So you want to make sure to get that as accurate as possible. So these rings are all the same. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to push it in to that line. And again, since I'm using a spare amount of glue, it dries or gets sticky pretty quick. So just make sure you work it into the right area. Make sure that you can still see the pencil line just to the edge, but that it's consistent all the way around. Okay, so we've got that one on there. You can see how fast it started to dry and drag the burned pieces of paper from the laser cutter. So anyways, we'll put the other ones on here and not on this line. Make sure we're done with that glue line. So we don't want that anymore. It actually goes to the front. You want it slightly back from the front so you can put a fillet there. If you have it right to the front, you can't really put a fillet very well. So put the other rings on and then start doing the fillets. Okay, I've got all my rings on there. Double check everything just to make sure before these completely dry. If I made a mistake, I can get them off still. But now they're ready for fillets. You can see on the front one I actually left a little bit of an edge there all the way around, so I can put a fillet around there and smooth it out. So I'm just going to take again some of the Tite Bond and I'm just going to let it flow into that crease. And you don't need much, just enough to consistently cover it. If you get more on there, it doesn't hurt it. Just try not to get it inside the tube. Okay, so we'll just move that around. And again, gravity will feed it into that gap. So we'll let it dry one direction vertically, and then we'll let it dry, and then we can flip it over and do the other one. If you do both of them at the same time and you let it dry, the glue's gonna move and give you issues. So we want to set it like that and let it dry. So I'll do the other two rings, let them dry, and then flip it over and do the other side. Okay, while that's drying, I'm going to move the next step. And it's nice with these rockets, you can always just keep going in different sections. You don't have to stop and wait and then start over again. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut out the fin guide, which is that, with our scissors, cutting it pretty precise, and we're going to tape it down to the tube and mark our fin lines. And I've also got another fin alignment system, that tube measuring guide I showed earlier on how to mark the tubes actually has a thing, some parts to actually mark your fin areas too, or fin positioning. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to use this first, and then we're going to double check it with that other piece, because sometimes it's hard to glue these pieces of paper correctly. Sometimes they get crooked. Sometimes the printing is slightly off, although Estes is pretty good about making it full size. But anyways, so I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so we're going to take this piece here, take a little piece of tape, and we're going to put the piece of tape right here. And we're going to take one of the tubes, and we're going to move this around the tube, and we're going to tape it, and this part with the little slashes goes down first. Get it as close to even as possible. Pull it kind of tight. Line up those marks. These little marks here are making sure to align it correctly. And then we leave a little bit of a gap down here to make our tick lines. So if this feels pretty tight, we're going to go ahead and make those lines, and we're going to do the top and the bottom. Just to be sure, if you have 2 points, you can always draw a straight line with 2 points. If you try it with one, it doesn't draw straight all the time. So now this one here is for the launch lug. So we're going to put LL for launch lug. And then on these ones, I'm going to mark FL, which is fin line. Fin line there, fin line there, and fin line there. Okay, so now that we got those marked, we can slide this off. Keep this around because you may need it later if you make a mistake, or if you just need it later. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to double check those tick marks with my guide, and these come with that other guide, and what they do is they have different size tubes, and this one is going to fit on this one particularly, but it's got markings to show a 4-fin unit and a 3-fin unit. You can see these little gouges there. So what we're going to do is we're going to put that on this side here, and when I put that tube marking guide on here and I line everything up, everything should line up perfectly with those tick marks. And they do. And then the launch lug, we'll just make a heavier piece for the launch lug. Okay, so now that we've confirmed that those are correct on the 3-fin unit, we can take our other piece here, slide off the block there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a line, a straight line, using those tick marks. So So we'll find a tick mark here. And line it up with the edge, this here, and we'll just make a mark like so. We'll do that with each one. And what that's going to allow us to do is this gives us a super straight mark, and then we can extend the mark. Okay, so make sure those are on the actual tick marks, and then what I can do is I can just take, depending on how long the fin units are or where the fin units are, I can actually take this piece here, since the tube is big enough, and actually use that to mark it further down the body tube. And it's pretty straight. Some people mark it metal T-bars to do the same thing. You can use a door jamb. I don't like using door jambs because some of them don't work right depending on the size of the tube. Okay. Okay, so now we've got the tube marked the way we want. And we can move on to the next step, which is actually, first I've got this one thing partially dry. I'm just going to test fit that. And it's looking good. So that motor mount is starting to come together. Okay, on to the next step.